All right, so today we're diving into something pretty big. Mastering commercial real estate.
Yeah.
And to guide us through this deep dive, we've got Cara Conde's pretty comprehensive work. It's called
Yeah.
Mastering Commercial Real Estate, and it's dated March 23rd, 2025.
Right. We're not just going to touch on the surface. We're going to extract the core stuff from her guide
Right.
to help you guys understand commercial real estate investment. Think of this as a shortcut to getting the essentials,
Okay.
and also to see why Conde's approach, positions her as a leading authority in the field, right?
So right off the bat, Conde, she describes commercial real estate as a chess game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I liked about the analogy was that it signals right away that this is not, this is not a casual endeavor.
Not at all.
It requires strategic thinking, planning, and awareness that, okay, the potential for building wealth is there.
Yeah.
But so are the risks if you don't play your moves wisely, right?
Right. The chess game analogy is brilliant because it highlights the need for long-term strategic thinking,
Right.
understanding the different pieces on the board, meaning the different property types and how they interact,
Okay.
and anticipating your opponent's moves, meaning market fluctuations,
Mm-hmm.
economic shifts, things like that.
So for those of our listeners, maybe who are newer to this, what exactly is commercial real estate?
Yeah, good question. Commercial real estate, or CRE.
Right.
Put simply, it's any property that's designed to generate income.
Okay.
So we're not talking about single-family homes here.
Right.
We're talking about office buildings, retail spaces, industrial warehouses, those massive apartment complexes with 5 or more units.
Uh-huh.
And then even those like specialty properties, hotels, and data centers.
Yeah.
The key here is the purpose.
Yeah.
It's to produce revenue.
So a totally different motivation than buying a home just for your personal use.
Right, exactly.
So what are some ways that commercial real estate is different from residential real estate?
Well, Conde points out a few key distinctions in her guide. First off, the financial scale is much larger.
Okay.
You're usually looking at investments anywhere from $500,000 to the tens of millions, even hundreds of millions.
Wow.
And then you got those lease agreements.
Yeah.
They're way longer,
Yeah.
often spanning 3 to 15 years.
Okay.
So that offers a different dynamic, right?
Right.
Than that typical one-year lease you see in residential.
Totally.
And lastly, your tenants are usually businesses, big organizations, or multiple households in those apartment buildings, rather than just individual families.
So you're right. Those longer leases do suggest a different kind of stability and a potentially more predictable income, right?
Absolutely.
So Cara Conde, she breaks down the commercial properties into several types.
Yeah.
Can we quickly go through those?
Of course. So she starts with office properties.
Yeah.
Basically, everything from those big skyscrapers downtown to those smaller suites in suburban areas.
Yeah.
The commonality is they provide a space for businesses.
Makes sense.
Then you got retail, and that covers everything from those massive malls to your local strip mall, standalone stores.
Yeah.
The crucial thing here, and Conde highlights this, is foot traffic and visibility.
So it sounds like with retail, the location isn't just important, it's everything.
Precisely.
Okay.
And then there's industrial real estate. Think warehouses, those big distribution centers, manufacturing facilities.
Yeah.
Access to transportation for those is absolutely vital.
Right. Highways, railways, ports.
Exactly.
Got it.
Then you have multifamily, which we mentioned earlier. It's those apartment buildings with 5 or more units under one owner.
Yeah.
And then that provides a steady income stream from all those rents.
Okay. And then we have one more category for those more specialized properties.
Yes, the specialty category. Conde gives us examples like medical office buildings
Okay.
and data centers. Now, these often require, very specific infrastructure or licenses, which makes it harder to, enter, but it also, potentially leads to higher returns because, limited supply and consistent demand.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got a very diverse set of asset classes here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why would anyone consider investing in commercial real estate?
Yeah.
Instead of putting their money elsewhere?
Well, Conde's guide highlights a few compelling advantages.
Right.
First, the potential for returns.
Okay.
Commercial real estate, historically, it's averaged annual returns of 9 to 12%.
Wow.
And this is according to the National Council of Real Estate Investment Fiduciaries, or NDREI.
Got it.
And then there's the stability offered by those long-term leases.
Right.
More predictable cash flow. And lastly, diversification.
Yeah.
It's Performance isn't tied to the stock market or, bond yields.
So that 9 to 12% historical return figure really gets your attention. And Conde, she even provides a real-world example to really show this potential.
Yeah, she does. She talks about a $1.2 million industrial park purchased in 2019.
Okay.
By 2025, so 6 years later, demand goes up, market conditions are good,
Mm.
rents go up 20%, and that property is now worth $1.8 million.
Wow, that's great.
And it's not just paper gains, it's also generating cash flow, for those investors.
Okay.
A tangible example of that wealth building potential.
Of course, every investment has its risks.
Yeah, for sure.
And Condi does talk about the potential downsides.
Yeah, she stresses that it's crucial to be aware of the risks, things like vacancy, when the property isn't making money,
Right.
the need for those repairs and that maintenance,
Right.
and then the impact of, those broader economic downturns, how those affect property values and rents.
Yeah.
But she stresses that these can be mitigated,
Okay.
diversifying your holdings, across different types.
Uh-huh.
And most importantly, leveraging the expertise of experienced people.
Okay, so having a guide like Cara Conde, that would be essential for navigating this chess game successfully.
Absolutely.
Now, the guide moves into those core skills that you need to thrive.
Yeah.
The first one she really focuses on is property evaluation.
Right.
And this sounds like a make or break kind of area.
Absolutely. She puts it well. A poor property acquisition can be a long-term burden,
Okay,
but a well-chosen one can generate wealth for years to come.
that's what we want.
Exactly. So the first thing she talks about is location.
Makes sense.
And it's not about, if it looks pretty or not.
Right.
It's about things like proximity to jobs,
Yeah.
access to transportation, highways, public transport, and are there things driving demand there, universities,
Yeah.
hospitals, ports.
That makes sense. A business needs to be accessible to its employees, customers.
Right.
Certain industries thrive in specific locations.
Exactly.
So what about the financial side of evaluating a property?
Well, the numbers are key. Conde stresses understanding things like the cap rate, which is your net operating income, or NOI,
Okay.
divided by the property value. It basically tells you how quickly you can get your money back.
Okay.
You want a cap rate of 6 to 8% or higher, depending on the market and the risk.
Okay.
And then there's NOI, that's your revenue minus all the operating expenses.
So like property taxes, insurance.
Yeah, property management fees, all of that.
Yeah.
And then there's cash flow,
Okay.
which is what's left after you've paid off your debt service, your mortgage payments.
So cap rate, it gives you that quick picture of the potential return. NOI tells you how profitable the property is.
Right.
And cash flow is what you actually put in your pocket.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
Now, what about the physical condition of the property? I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers
Mm-hmm.
and kind of overlook this, but that seems like it would be a big mistake.
Yeah, definitely a mistake. Conde says you need a thorough assessment. Pay attention to the age of the roof, the HVAC system.
Yeah.
Ideally the roof under 20 years old.
Okay.
HVAC within 15 to 20 years.
Right.
And crucially, are there hazardous materials present, like asbestos, which can be incredibly expensive to remove?
So those are some crucial things to look at.
Yes.
Now, Conde puts a big emphasis on due diligence. Can you explain what that means for our listeners?
Yeah, due diligence is essentially, you're going deep into everything about that property
Okay.
before you buy it.
Got it.
And Conde considers this absolutely essential. It involves a few key steps.
Okay.
You got to research similar properties, what we call comps in the area, to understand what they're going for
Okay.
and what kind of rents they're getting.
Right.
Platforms like Reonomy and LoopNet are super useful for this.
Okay.
Then you got to look into the zoning at the local level, make sure you can actually use it for what you want,
Uh-huh.
and vet the financial stability of any potential tenants.
Right. Makes sense.
And lastly, and this is a big one, hire professional inspectors to check the structure, the mechanics, the environmental condition.
Okay.
This can cost, Conde says, anywhere from $500 to $2,000,
Right.
but that's a small price for, the peace of mind.
Right.
She also recommends, 5-year projection, looking at potential income and expenses.
Okay, so it sounds like you're doing a lot of investigating.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's essential
It
is
is.
to avoid those costly surprises, right?
Exactly.
Conde even shares a story where this due diligence actually prevented a bad investment.
Right. She talks about this $3 million retail center deal that initially looked pretty good based on its cap rate.
Okay.
But through due diligence, they found out that the anchor tenant, the one that was drawing most of the people to the center,
Yeah.
their lease was expiring and they weren't going to renew it.
Okay.
And plus, local traffic was going down.
Uh-huh.
So they were able to walk away from a deal that could have really hurt them financially.
So that's a good example of how those initial impressions can
Yeah,
be deceiving.
exactly.
So you've found your property.
Yep.
You've done your evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
The next big step is financing.
Right.
What does Cara guide tell us about how to do this for commercial real estate?
Financing is key, and Condé emphasizes that you need to know your options.
Right.
She talks about conventional loans from banks and credit unions. Those usually need a big down payment,
Okay.
20 to 30%.
Right.
Good credit score above 680,
Okay.
and a DSCR, or debt service coverage ratio, of 1.25 or higher.
Now, what is that?
It means that the property's net operating income needs to be at least 125% of what you owe in debt payments.
Oh.
It shows you can repay the loan.
So that's a really important thing for lenders.
Yes, it shows them how risky you are.
Okay.
Then you got SBA 504 loans.
Okay.
These are good for owner users, businesses that are going to occupy a big chunk of the property.
Got it.
Down payments can be as low as 10%,
Wow.
with a maximum loan of $5 million.
Okay.
Then you have bridge loans. These are short-term, 12 to 24 months, higher interest rates, though.
Okay.
8 to 12%. You use these for quick flips,
Okay.
or when you need temporary money before you get permanent financing.
Makes sense.
And lastly, seller financing. The owner becomes the lender,
Okay.
and the terms are up for negotiation.
So it sounds like there's a whole range of tools available,
Mhm.
depending on your situation.
Yeah,
And the property.
exactly.
Now, what's the current interest rate environment?
Well, as of March 23rd, 2025,
Okay.
Condé says interest rates for commercial mortgages are around 6.5 to 7.5%.
Okay.
And this is based on the Fed.
Got it.
It's crucial to keep that in mind when you're seeing if a deal is even feasible.
Right. Right.
She even gives an example of someone who got financing, a dentist, who bought a $900,000 office building
Okay.
with only 15% down.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, they used an SBA loan back in 24
Mhm.
and got an interest rate of 5.8%,
Okay.
which is below the 6 to 7% that everyone else was getting at the time.
Yeah. Wow. So they really knew how to negotiate and find the right programs.
Exactly. Shows you how valuable it is to have experts on your side.
Absolutely. So what are the typical steps involved in actually applying for commercial financing?
All right, so Condé says, first, gather all your financial documents, tax returns, financial statements, all that.
Okay.
Then you got to demonstrate that your DSCR is good enough, show the lender you can cover the loan.
Right.
And lastly, there's closing,
Okay.
which for commercial real estate, it can take 30 to 60 days.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's a complex process.
Okay. So we found our property.
Yeah.
We got the financing.
Mm-hmm.
Now we got to get those tenants and sign those leases.
Right, the fun part.
What does Cara say about mastering that process?
Well, she stresses that the lease is the foundation of your income.
Okay.
You know, a poorly structured lease can lead to real headaches down the line.
Right.
She breaks down the different types. You got the gross lease, the simplest one.
Okay.
Tenant pays fixed rent.
Yeah.
Landlord covers all expenses.
Got it.
Modified gross lease, you and the tenant split some of the operating costs.
Okay.
And then there are net leases, where the tenant pays some or all of the property expenses on top of rent.
Okay.
Single net lease, they pay the property taxes.
Got it.
Double net, they pay taxes and insurance.
Okay.
And triple net, or NNN, that's the most landlord-friendly.
Okay.
Tenants responsible for taxes, insurance, and all maintenance.
Wow. So that NNN structure, that's the one that would give you the most predictable expenses.
Exactly.
Okay. So what are some key things you need to negotiate in a commercial lease?
Rent escalations. Those are predetermined rent increases.
Okay.
Typically 2 to 5% every year.
Makes sense.
Tenant improvement allowances.
Mm-hmm.
Money the landlord gives to customize the space.
Got it.
And renewal options gives the tenant the right to extend the lease,
Okay.
at the end of the initial term.
Right.
Provides security for both parties.
So it sounds like a well-crafted lease
Mm-hmm.
could really impact the profitability
Absolutely.
and stability of the investment.
It can make or break you.
Condé is an example of how effective leasing can really make a difference.
Right. She describes a $1.5 million office building that was only half full.
Okay.
They got a 10-year NNN lease with a law firm.
Uh-huh.
NOI doubled, going from $80,000 to $150,000 a year.
Wow, that's great.
And then That boosted the property's value by 35%.
That's huge. So those long-term, well-structured leases
Yeah.
really are key.
Super important.
Okay, so what are some common mistakes
Mhm.
that landlords make during this process?
Well, Condi cautions against a few things. One, short lease terms, less than 3 years. That creates instability
Got it.
and makes the property less attractive to buyers.
Right.
Two, vague clauses
Okay.
that can cause confusion and disputes.
Makes sense.
So clarity is key.
Right.
And longer leases are good for the landlord.
Got it.
She recommends a few best practices.
Okay.
Use lawyers or proven templates for leases. Screen tenants thoroughly, check credit, past leases, even interview old landlords,
Okay.
and make sure the lease clearly states who's responsible for what, especially with rent escalations and maintenance.
So you're saying basically don't cut corners in that process.
Exactly. It's worth it in the long run.
Okay, so we've covered the basics, but Conde's guide also goes into some advanced strategies
Yeah.
and emerging trends, starting with market analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it so important to understand the market in commercial real estate?
Market analysis is your foundation. It gives you context.
Okay.
You understand the forces, economics, demographics that are driving demand in specific areas.
Okay.
Conde says, watch out for a few key indicators.
Okay.
Job growth that predicts office space demand.
Got it.
Population growth that fuels the need for retail and, housing
Makes sense.
and infrastructure, things like highways, public transport.
Right.
Those can make industrial properties way more appealing.
So you're looking at the big picture and then understanding how it translates to real estate demand.
Exactly.
Where does Conde suggest we look for this kind of information?
Well, she says use a variety of sources, platforms like CoStar for data on rents, vacancy rates, sales trends.
Okay.
For local insights, you can actually monitor social media.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you can get a feel for what's happening on the ground.
Right.
And of course, visit the areas yourself, see what's going on.
Makes sense.
Ultimately, you want to create a 3 to 5 year forecast for market growth in those areas you're interested in.
So hard data and actually going there yourself to observe, it sounds like you need both.
Yeah, you got to see it to believe it sometimes.
Okay, so Conde also gives an example of how good market analysis led to a good return on investment.
Mm-hmm. Back in 2021, careful analysis showed that a suburb in Texas was primed for a boom in e-commerce.
Oh, okay.
So her client invested in a warehouse there.
Okay.
Fast forward to 2025, those warehouse rents jumped from $15 to $25 per square foot.
Wow, that's a significant increase.
Yeah, and it shows that you can get big returns if you anticipate those market trends.
Clearly, okay, so understanding where the market's going is crucial.
Yeah.
Now, the guide also talks about technology and sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
How are those playing a role in commercial real estate?
Technology's changing the game. Conde talks about virtual tours, things like Matterport.
Yep.
Lets people see the space remotely,
Okay.
expands your reach, doesn't cost a lot per property.
So that saves time and money. It also opens you up to a bigger pool of potential buyers or tenants.
Exactly. She also points out property management software like
Yeah.
CRE
Okay.
makes things like rent collection, tenant communication, maintenance scheduling
Uh-huh.
way more efficient.
Streamlines everything.
Yeah, for sure.
So what about sustainability? It's a hot topic everywhere.
It's not just a buzzword anymore. It can actually boost your value.
Okay, how so?
Conde talks about solar panels.
Okay.
Yeah, it costs money up front,
Right.
but they can slash your energy bills by 20 to 30%.
Okay, that's significant.
And then there's LED certification.
Okay.
That's a global standard for green buildings.
Uh-huh.
It attracts tenants who care about the environment,
Right.
and you can charge more for rent,
Okay.
maybe 5 to 10% more.
So are there any financial incentives out there
Yeah.
to encourage these types of upgrades?
Yeah, Conde mentions federal tax credits, like a 26% credit for solar in 2025.
Okay.
And then some states and local utilities offer rebates for energy efficiency.
Got it.
These incentives can really shorten that payback period. You might see a return in 5 to 7 years.
Okay, so it seems like it's not just the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It can be profitable too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
She suggests starting with an energy audit. See what upgrades make the most sense.
Makes sense.
Maybe start small with LED lighting, then look into bigger things like solar or LET certification.
So technology and sustainability are really important to stay competitive.
Yeah, they're essential.
The guide also talks about economic cycles and how to navigate those.
Right. Can't ignore the economy. Conde explains how different economic periods can affect different property types.
Okay.
Good economy, low interest rates, lots of jobs.
Hmm.
Retail and office space do well,
Makes sense.
but in a recession,
Yeah.
people downsize, spend less.
Uh-huh.
Things like multifamily housing and industrial properties, those tend to hold up better.
That makes sense. People still need a place to live, and
Exactly.
goods still need to be moved around.
Right.
She gives an example of how adapting to the economic outlook can lead to better investments.
Yeah, one client was looking at an office building back in 2022,
Okay.
but rates were rising, economy looked shaky,
Right.
so Condi suggested a warehouse instead.
Okay.
18 months later, the warehouse's rental income doubled.
Wow, that's a great move.
Yeah, e-commerce was booming, you know?
Yeah.
So it was all about being flexible, understanding which property types would do well in those conditions.
So you're staying flexible and understanding which types are going to perform well in different parts of the economic cycle.
Exactly.
So what specific strategies does Conde recommend for navigating these cycles?
Well, she says keep an eye on those key economic indicators.
Okay.
Things like GDP growth, interest rates, job reports. See where the economy's going.
Right.
Be ready to shift your focus, maybe redevelop that underperforming retail space into something mixed use with apartments.
Okay.
And lastly, think long term, 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
Ride out those ups and downs.
Makes sense.
Remember, she reminds us, commercial real estate has historically delivered strong returns,
Right.
beating inflation over the long haul.
Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about property management.
Oh, yeah.
What are the essentials?
Property management is crucial to maintaining your investment's value.
Right.
Conde emphasizes proactive maintenance,
Okay.
regular HVAC tune-ups,
Right.
roof inspections, prevent those big, costly repairs,
Okay.
and then tenant retention. Keep those good tenants happy.
How do you do that?
Offer lease renewals early, provide good service, nice amenities. She gives an example of this 40-unit apartment complex.
Okay.
They had high occupancy and raised rents.
Okay, great.
They used a tenant app
Okay.
and offered 24-hour maintenance.
So being proactive and focusing on your tenants, that can really pay off.
It does.
Now, should you manage the property yourself or hire someone?
Conde says if it's small, maybe under 10 units,
Okay.
and you have the time and know-how,
Yeah.
you could do it yourself.
Right.
But for bigger, more complex properties,
Yeah.
hire a pro. They'll charge a percentage of rent, 8 to 12%,
Yeah.
or a flat annual fee.
Got it.
She also mentions tools like property management software,
Okay.
having good handyman and accounting contacts,
Right.
and doing those tenant surveys, see how they're feeling and which you can improve.
So we'll talk about mistakes.
Yeah.
What are some pitfalls to avoid?
Gandhi highlights a few. One, over-leveraging, taking on too much debt,
Okay.
like loans above 70% of the property value.
Right.
Risky if your income drops.
Makes
2, skipping due diligence.
Right.
You might uncover hidden costs after you buy.
Yeah.
3, misjudging tenant demand.
Okay.
No demand, no tenants.
All right.
She tells a story about a traffic study that showed a planned road would kill foot traffic to a retail center
Wow.
that saved her client from a bad investment.
So it's all about being cautious and really doing your research.
Absolutely.
So how do you mitigate those risks?
She says build in a cushion for vacancy in your projections, maybe 10%.
Okay.
Have a reserve fund for repairs, maybe 5% of your income.
Okay.
Do those title searches, environmental assessment,
Right.
and run stress tests to see how the property would handle a bad economy.
Okay. Makes sense.
You got to be prepared.
Now, the guide also talks about ways to boost property value.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Right.
So Condi explains that the income capitalization approach is the main way to value commercial real estate.
Right. NOI divided by the cap rate.
Exactly. So to increase value, you got to increase NOI. You can raise rents, but do your market research first.
Right.
And cut operating expenses, maybe those energy-efficient upgrades we talked about. Physical improvements help too. Upgrade the parking lot. Modernize the facade, maybe even rezone it for a higher value use.
Okay.
She talks about a property that went from $1 million to $1.5 million in 3 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, new tenants, solar panels, 40% increase in value.
So you're saying a $10,000 increase in NOI at an 8% cap rate would be a $125,000 increase in value.
Exactly.
So it all boils down to maximizing that NOI, increasing revenue, managing expenses.
Yeah.
Now, Conde's guide ends with a people also ask section. What are some key takeaways from that?
So one question is, what makes Cara Conde an expert?
Okay, good question.
The answer is her experience, negotiation skills, knowledge of luxury home marketing,
Okay.
client-focused approach, and use of technology.
So it's a mix of experience and a forward-thinking approach.
Yeah, she's got it all.
So for those looking to get started, what advice does the guide offer?
Do your research. Use platforms like LoopNet.
Okay.
Start small or go big. Depends on your capital and your risk tolerance.
Okay.
Save for that down payment, usually around 20%.
Right.
She mentions REITs, too,
Okay.
for those who want to get in with less money up front.
Got it.
And for beginners, multifamily properties are usually a good starting point.
Okay.
She gives an example.